Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to Connect Africa. Depending where you are, it could be an evening, morning, or afternoon after a few days break. We are here at Connect Africa, myself and Kwame Gonza. So we welcome you here. Now, today is an important topic which is close to home for me. So what's happening in Ethiopia? The internet has it crazy that the devaluation of currency in Ethiopia, which is as a result of the IMF and World Bank pressure, because we have seen for the last couple of years in and out Ethiopia resisting for this thing to happen, which finally happened. So without further ado, we are a bit late, so I'll just go to straight to the question. But before that, a quick welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet, and greetings to everyone who's watching us. We are really glad to be back. We've not been around for some time. I think last week we didn't do a lot of broadcasting, but we are back as always to do the work that was given to us for the continent, of course, and all the African people. That is why we are here. And as Mahlet has mentioned, we are going to look at the date in Ethiopia, but we will not even stop at Ethiopia alone. We will continue in the future and look at other African countries and how they are suffering under debt and why are they suffering under debt right now that we have heard about the re-emergence of the International Monetary Fund. We've seen in Kenya, we are seeing in Nigeria the protests, and all these are because of the austerity measures that the International Monetary Fund normally imposes on African countries and especially the global South countries. And these, can they produce any good when it comes to Ethiopia if they are producing chaos in Kenya and Nigeria? So these are the things that we are going to look at today. We'll examine extensively. Thank you so much, Mahlet, once again, and thank you everyone who is on the channel and he's supporting us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so in continuation with that, I would like also to say thank you very much to people who have been here even before us. So Kwame, allow me just to say a few lines. I know that you're going to give us a paragraph of kind of, so that we have a background on this. Now, Ethiopia, just for us, Ethiopia secures close to US dollar 1 billion just in this week to support economy. Here is what, what to know, that the World Bank's board has approved $1.5 billion in financing for its first ever budget support lending to Ethiopia. The lender said, meaning World Bank, that late on Tuesday, as the East African Union, the East African nation, Ethiopia tries to push ahead with a long-running debt restructuring. Now, the other lender is that 3.4 billion for program from the from IMF, which it has got on which they got on Monday. So far, I mean, in the past, this happened all on Monday. We are on Thursday. It was, I think, on, if I'm not mistaken, 31%. On Monday, we have seen it. It used to be 50 something birr, $1 against Ethiopian birr. And then on Tuesday, we have seen that a little increase to today. I think it's 80 birr, just getting slowly down. And all this is, as we read and from my understanding, it's all currency liberalization. So before I go ahead and say the first question, Kwame, please paint for us a background and also followed by what does this currency liberalization means, as opposed to like a fixed rate, that it has this liberty, for the currency exchange to float on a different exchange rate. The floor is yours. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. To many, at least in the global South, which includes Africa, of course, the IMF and the World Bank have always been, dreaded forces, just as we are witnessing, as I mentioned, in Kenya, whereby people are demonstrating, especially the Gen Z there. And of course, the currently ongoing demonstrations in Nigeria, which also can be said to be happening because of the consequences brought about by the International Monetary Fund. and its policies in these countries. Yet, amidst this force, which we would say is a force for evil, you know, the African ruling class always continues to run, to these institutions whenever there is corruption and mismanagement in the various countries, or whenever corruption takes a toll, at home in the various African countries. And of course, on one side, misfortune, because you remember for the IMF, there's no distinction between corruption and mismanagement and then misfortune. All right. So a lot of people, of course, when you talk about corruption and mismanagement, that is the only thing they know in Africa. But on the other side, also there's misfortune. All right, and we will go into depth on what misfortune is, and all these, whether it is corruption, mismanagement, and misfortune, the IMF, for it treats it as business. It is not a charity organization. It is a financial institution which was started after World War II and is dominated by the so-called Paris Club, whose head or whose leader is the United States. And the United States in itself is so much indebted that recently figures have come out that the United States is in debt to the tune of $35 trillion right now, followed by its European brothers, uh, and of course, to some extent, once imperialist Japan is also part of that Paris Club. These are the countries which control the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These institutions which move, together. So today's observations in this program, rather than being an indictment of these lucratively profitable institutions, as the Ugandan president recently said in Nairobi at the World Bank organized International Development Association Summit, where he mentioned that in the past, the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, in the face of actually Ajay Banga, who is the current managing director of World Bank, President Museveni mentioned that these institutions have focused on profiteering instead of improving people's lives. And this happened in Nairobi, at the International Development Association Summit, which was organized by the World Bank, where many African heads of state attended, including the Prime Minister Abiy, and he also gave a speech there. Therefore, for us, this analysis today is going to be a reflection on our continued engagement with these institutions, whether we are talking about International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. So we are going to ask a question: with the numerously and these numerous and previously unfruitful engagements between Africa and these imperialist institutions, or you can call them neo-colonial institutions, is it worth for us to continue entrusting our futures, the futures of our children and our grandchildren's, or is it time for us to persevere at least and eat dust in the present to save the future of the African continent? So these are the questions that we are going to deliberate on. Now, to go to the question which Mahlet has asked is, what is liberalization, the so-called free floating of currencies? Now, the free floating of currencies basically means that if the government, is in control of its currency and is controlling how much foreign currency is going out, or foreign exchange, the so-called foreign exchange, which foreign exchange actually means the United States dollar, because all of us are keeping our reserve currencies in the United States dollar. So whenever they're talking about foreign exchange, they are actually talking about the United States dollar. Whenever they are talking about reserves, they are talking about the United States dollar, because majority of the countries, that is where we keep our foreign exchange. And let me say this also, that the United States has an interest in countries using the United States dollar. The United States, as a country and as a leader of the imperialist order or the neo-colonial order, has an interest in having its currency used all across the globe and freely, for that matter, freely without interruption. So when they see a country which controls that currency in its country, they see that as an obstacle to what they call free trade. And therefore, these so-called reforms or these measures which they come with and they call reforms, they see them as necessary. And we have seen this with China. China controls its currency. Okay, it doesn't just let its currency flow or float on the on the international market or within the country itself. Now, this is helpful simply because for developing countries such as ours, you need to do this. You need this simply because your currency is not as powerful as the United States dollar. It's not a reserve currency for any country. When you look at the pound, for example, it is a reserve currency for some countries, and this country is very powerful. When you look at the euro, it can be looked at as a reserve currency for some countries. All right. So for to float this currency, is profitable. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. But for our countries which are still growing and they are not, exporting enough, it is not really very sensible not to have your currency under control and leave it to the so-called floating, and liberalizing, so-called liberalizing freely, whereby it can be done by all the banks. Any banks can be able to do whatever they want in the country. It needs the solid, grasp control of the central bank itself. So this is what it means in liberalization, just to leave the country uncontrolled by the state or the central bank. And the central bank's work now becomes a merely intervention, as we have seen in some of the documents that have been released by the Ethiopian government and the central bank in Ethiopia, is just to intervene here and there, but not really to control what is going on in the market. And that has to do with the currency itself.
All right, then. Thank you very much. I think now we have a good picture in front of us what it means, whether this is currency liberalization, the IMF, World Bank, their interest, their formation, under what background. It's always important to, pull those background history for a better understanding, to analyze what's happening contemporarily and what is going to happen now. So to sum it up in the words of Dejuma Butik, so the so-called free trade is not actually really free. Now, Kwame, we go to now our questions. This session going to be a long one. As a person, who is a Pan-African and an analyst on what's happening in Africa and globally, that relates to Africa. And secondly, as a person also who has been really following on what's happening in Ethiopia, particularly from the 2020, ever since that regional or the war in the northern part of Ethiopia, and who also sadly followed really on the policies that Prime Minister Abiy is implementing. How did you find the current news of that Ethiopia started now to negotiate this round of loan, and also what is, if you can give us a background, what Ethiopia's external debt looks like currently. So back to you. I can't wait to hear.
Okay, thank you very much, Mahlet. Ethiopia's external debt is around 28.6, around 28, at least, in 2022, it was around $28.6 billion. And up to around 75% of that debt is owned all is as a result of the so-called Paris Club, and together with their International Monetary Fund, is because of the West. Basically, if I may put it simply, 75% of that debt is because of the West, and that includes their institutions, which is International Monetary Fund, World Bank, the Euro bonds, of course, which Ethiopia has issued, and then the so-called Paris Club. Paris Club basically means the United States and all the colonial countries, the countries which were engaged in colonialism, and of course, including Canada, Denmark, Finland, Australia, Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, Norway, and all these countries, and the United States and the United Kingdom and Switzerland. And of course, we have Russia in there also. But I don't think Russia really has a lot of say, and other small countries like Brazil, I really don't think those ones they really have a lot of say. But basically, Paris Club is just that group of countries. So on the side of Ethiopia's debt, uh, Ethiopia failed to pay its debt. If you look at last year, Ethiopia was supposed to pay some $33 million in debt, all right, which it pays annually. And it failed to remit that money for 2023, all right. It failed to hand in that money. And of course, it followed the other countries like Ghana, and I think it was Zambia also. And we saw even that last year, during the so-called new global pact, new global finance pact, which happened in France, that the Prime Minister Abe also, when he was speaking, he spoke about the restructuring. He was asking for the restructuring of Ethiopia's debt. The restructuring basically means that looking at how they can help Ethiopia to extend its payment terms. Okay, its payment. So that's what restructuring means. Debt restructuring, it means that a country is asking for more favorable terms in which to pay its debt, which it owes these creditors, these so-called creditors, especially in the Western world. Now, what we are seeing is that the reasons for this, for Ethiopia, of course, even though other African countries, it can be said that it was mismanagement. When you go, for example, Nigeria, you go to all these Zambia, you go to Ghana, especially Ghana, you can see that over there was mismanagement. But unlike them, for Ethiopia, you can see that it had a lot of challenges. It's a country which has been going under a lot of challenges since 2020. If you remember, there was the war in Tigray. All right. So the war in Tigray, even there is an article which appeared in I think it was on April 8th, 2024, and in that article, it was stated that in the Tigray, region, a lot of infrastructure was destroyed, all right, and even some industries were destroyed. So it led to backsliding for Ethiopia when it came to meeting its financial obligations, even to the even to the international community and international debtors. So for Ethiopia, you can see that there is that problem which appeared. I will not say much about the Ukraine war because a lot of African countries have been using this as an excuse, and I will not talk about so much about COVID. Of course, COVID, when it comes to international trade, of course, it may have affected, because when it comes to international trade, China is the major supplier of whether it is raw materials or machinery and other goods. It may have affected slightly when it comes to COVID, but majorly what I would talk about, I think it is, which I would consider is majorly the war in Tigray, that it affected the country majorly, that a lot of infrastructure, it was not just industries which did not work and were destroyed during that period, during the war when it happened, but also infrastructure was, destroyed. So when you look at 2021, 2022, the country is emerging from this chaotic period. It needs reconstruction, just like any country which is coming out of war and instability. the country would need, reconstruction. So I think that when we are talking about the IMF and World Bank and Ethiopia's reasons for going to the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, compared to other countries like Ghana, you can see that there's a huge difference why the Ethiopian government has decided to go to the International Monetary Fund to seek, help with this kind of money. Now, the the analysis or the conclusion or the result of that seeking of the fund from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, whether it will be productive and fruitful, that is another issue. Because we know the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, they are not about benefiting you as a country. So whether that is going to be fruitful, is a different case. But the reasons for Ethiopia going there is, are different from countries like Ghana, where it's just mismanagement. In Ghana, there was just mismanagement, complete mismanagement of the economy, and all the other African countries, you can see that there was a lot of mismanagement. And maybe in Egypt too, you can say that there was instability for some time, that it affected the economy because of that instability that has been there for a very long time due to the removal of their first president. No, I mean their recent president, who was Hosni Mubarak, and then others came over there. So there was a lot of chaos in Egypt. But in other countries like Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, which have willingly gone to the International Monetary Fund, not because of really serious problems that have happened at home. It is really mismanagement, or it can be said that it was mismanagement which led them to go to the International Monetary Fund. So basically, these are the events surrounding Ethiopia's going to the International Monetary Fund. The desire to bring back, productivity. All right, productivity after that chaotic period and increased productivity. We remember even that before the COVID period, Ethiopia was the fastest growing economy, on the African continent. All right, and even currently in the document which was issued as a statement, it was said that Ethiopia is still the biggest economy when it comes to the East African region. Is still the biggest economy in the East African region. Bypassing countries like leading countries like Kenya and all of them, because Kenya can be said that is the economic powerhouse around the East African region, after Ethiopia. So these are the events which we can say that are surrounding Ethiopia's going to the International Monetary Fund to take a loan.
Thank you, Kwame, for laying out that for us. Now, let's go to our second question, which is about, now there is a statement that's released by the governor or the National Bank of Ethiopia, the president, which is, the situation, what it will do, this loan that's coming to the country and the devaluation. Now, while examining, I know that you have read it and really between the lines. So while examining the document is published by the federal government of Ethiopia and the National Bank of Ethiopia. Now we learned that yes, Ethiopia has devalued the currency, and we have to remind our audience that Ethiopia, as I said in the beginning, for the past couple of years, in and out in the US, in Ethiopia, in different places, following the World Bank, then the IMF people to renegotiate this, while IMF and World Bank still pressure Ethiopia to devalue its currency, and Ethiopia was resisting this, and this has come into our conversation in different times. And so can we say like that Ethiopia has finally gave in, or the meaning of devaluation has changed? Who is the beneficiary really actually? If Ethiopia, as it is laid out, used for all those things that has been laid out in the article or in the published statement, do you think at the end of the day Ethiopia is the one who benefits? I mean, yeah, so give us your analysis on this one.
Yeah, so on the benefit, I think that whether Ethiopia is going to benefit from this loan, which is the $10.7 billion which the Ethiopia has asked for, and of course 3.4 billion has already been dispersed. Let me say this also, that the way the IMF normally gives these loans is not that when you ask for example, Ethiopia is expecting 10.7. Actually, this is one of the biggest amounts that the IMF has ever given on this African continent, $10.7 billion. And it doesn't just give this money out of the blue, but they also look at the economy and the potential of the economy. Now, in the past years, Ethiopia has been sort of an independent economy that is closed off, as we mentioned. And a lot of people, of course, are happy. I've seen some Ethiopians are really happy about what is happening, that these kind of reforms are happening. But the Prime Minister Abiy has been doing reforms ever since he came to power in 2018. And he has indicated this even in the document which was published. And that document, Malit, I think that document is called, let me see the name of the document. Let me have a look at the document. Is the macroeconomic reform program policy statement. This is the statement, the official statement which came out before even the devaluation. This is the statement which was announcing the enforcement of these so-called reforms. The reforms which the Prime Minister Abiy was carrying out since 2018 when he came to power, of course, those were good for the country. Okay, they were internally generated. Let us first take that into consideration, and let us first note that those reforms were for the country, for the good of the country. Whether it is the bringing in of Safaricom, and opening up Ethiopia's telecom sector so that others can have can play inside, and then of course bringing in mobile money, so that Safaricom can do the same thing. All these were internally generated reforms, just like how you see that when China was closed up for a long time under Mao Zedong. Actually, I can compare, I can compare Prime Minister Abiy and his policies, how he came to even Deng Xiaoping, because Deng Xiaoping comes into China when China was very closed off. It had generated a lot of assets inside, its own assets, a lot of strength inside. And then, under President Mao, who brought China from the revolution in 1949 until he died, then Deng Xiaoping comes. Deng Xiaoping opens China up, all right, and allows in foreign capital to flow. So you can, compare, Prime Minister Abiy and what he was trying to do ever since he came in, that he was trying to open up Ethiopia and allow players, international players, to come into the country. Now, when it comes to the International Monetary Fund, when it involves itself in that process, now that is what the problem is. Because when you look at the document, to some extent, it is disheartening, it is weakening when you look at the document itself and what it is saying, the official statement itself, what it is saying. So I will read out a few, paragraphs for you to understand. And it is not lost on us to say that the IMF played a major role. And the IMF played a major role simply because in the negotiations, when negotiations began, Ethiopia refused some of the terms which the International Monetary Fund, gave. So the International Monetary Fund came to Ethiopia actually and left Ethiopia without a deal. All right. This simply showed you that the International Monetary Fund was pushing certain, policies onto the Ethiopian economy, which were not favorable to the Ethiopian people. All right. So now the agreement to the reforms or whatever policies currently the Prime Minister agreeing to them and implementing, it speaks to a couple of things. One, either the IMF has given in to the government, or the government has given in to the IMF. So that is what it means. And now, if the IMF is the one, if the government is the one, or which has gotten an upper hand, and the IMF has given in to the government, then you can say that the policies that are going to be implemented, they are people friendly, they are friendly to the people. But if it is the government which has given in to the demands of the International Monetary Fund, and it is the International Monetary Fund which has gotten an upper hand, then of course you can expect a disaster, because there's nowhere where the International Monetary Fund has gone and things have remained well, all right, for the people in that particular country. What has resulted is agony, for those particular countries. And I will not go very far to remind you, but I will just go, close to the neighbor, in Kenya, what is happening there in Kenya, because the people saw what is, in these documents that were signed by International Monetary Fund, and it was not good. I'll bring you to Ghana. The documents which were signed in Ghana, terrible. Taxes are skyrocketing in Ghana everywhere. All right. Taxes are high on everything, including mobile money transfer. Even though as a worker you pay, taxes on your salaries, the government comes in again and taxes you on the goods which you buy, taxes you on the fuel, and even taxes you when you transfer the very money they have already taxed a couple of times. Okay, so this is what the IMF is doing in a country like Ghana. The IMF, its results is what again you are seeing in Nigeria. And to go further than that, you can see what the IMF and the World Bank did to us with the structural adjustments in the 1970s when it came and took over the continent. All right. How did they take over the continent? They took over the continent because after independence, remember, the structural adjustments come after we have come out of the independence era. All right. After independence, the continent had relatively grown. Okay. Our continent had relatively grown, and our heads of state had put up some industries across the African continent. So it had relatively, the economy, Africa's economy had relatively grown from being a colony, being colonized, and we had built up some sort of independent economy on the African continent, or economies on the African continent. So the IMF desired to harvest that growth and take it to the West. They decided to harvest, all these gains which the African countries had made and take that money to the West. And even I even don't think you need to listen to me alone. You need to go and read for yourself. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's book called Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism. He points out how the World Bank and International Monetary Fund are benefiting from Africa's debt, the debt which they give to Africa. Because the debt, even I think even Dr. Shombori Kwao has spoken about this, that our countries, the poor countries, they are lent money at 7%, 5 to 7%, and sometimes 9% interest. And you know that you have to pay this interest on top of the principal money. Okay. As if that is not enough. When they are talking about money like the $10.7 billion, all that money does not come at once to you. They normally partition it one by one to make sure, they partition it, in chunks. Like, for example, right now, Ethiopia has been given $3.4 billion. But the reason they partition it like that is to make sure that they are implementing the policies which favor the Western countries, the so-called Paris Club. Okay, so that is the point there. And those are some of the policies that we are going to go through here. We are going to examine through here and see whether, we will leave it to the people who are watching to make their own conclusions. But this is where normally the details are very important for the public, especially to study so that they can make their own conclusions. But in the past, it has been that they come and they give you loan, but they want the resources in that particular country. And these were the tactics. And even people like John Perkins, who used to work with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and these organizations, wrote a book on it called, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So this is where everything started. But the organizations themselves, of course, were created in 1944, 1945, definitely after the World War II, or the European tribal war, as many people want to call it.
Yeah, thank you, Kwame, for that. Now, before I move to the next question, a quick one, which is derived from what you just said. So, is there a winner when a country gets a loan from these financial institutions, which are Western? Is there a time or a country as an example where you can win, when you can, where you can play smart, and where countries can benefit out of it?
So it's possible to win, but you have to really, maybe in this age, especially in this age when the imperialist West has somehow been weakened, that is when you have a chance maybe of having some victories. But the leadership itself has to be very smart, and of course it starts with you not giving in to the demands, these demands which they make during the phase when they are asking you to sign onto the documents. But if you sign onto the documents, definitely you are going to have to implement their policies, the policies which they are asking you to implement. But for various countries, I've barely seen any country which has benefited from these policies of the International Monetary Fund and
Does that
whatever it
include
says
China
that
that
you
you
should do.
mentioned
I've
before?
barely seen. I beg your pardon.
Now, I say, does that include China? Because at some point you mentioned China, where this government came at the time when China had a closed policy. So perhaps you finish that story, then we understand what happens there.
Yeah. So unless you don't let the structure of your economy slip out of your control. But when you look
Mhm.
at when we look at the policies which are in this document, which the IMF has signed with the Ethiopian government, it is almost desiring to take over the economy.
Mhm.
Their desire is to take over the economy, to control the whole economy. So it becomes extremely difficult. It becomes extremely difficult. So, of course, the
Okay,
government
so
in itself has said,
with that being said, okay, let me
yeah,
just ask. So, can we briefly look at the demands that have been tabled by IMF to Ethiopia, and if you can just examine it, what are these things that have been demanded
yes. So,
and
so,
how they
so,
work?
so, let me just go back a little bit. Yes, let me just go back a little bit to your question. You can see that the back and forth when you see a government like Ethiopia, that back and forth, the negotiations which
Mhm.
happened, and Ethiopia was not accepting. It
Yeah,
was that pushing back, all
yeah,
right, because Ethiopia was trying to push back
yeah.
and have a good deal for its people and its economy. It was fighting to retain control over its economy, all right. And of course, that control, it includes the fact that it wants to control the currency in the country. Because if you control the currency in your country, you control these foreign currencies which are in the country. Because what they are calling foreign exchange is just the United States dollar. That's what they are trying to do. They are trying to make sure that the United States dollar remains supreme in your country. All right. They are trying to see that if Ethiopia wants to say, we are going to use, for the goods that we are buying from China, we are going to use the Chinese renminbi. They are trying to avoid that. That is why you are seeing that they have been demonizing China on one hand, and they have been saying that China is burdening Africa with debt. But as we are seeing right now, China controls only about 25 to 30% of Ethiopia's external debt. 95, 70, 70 to 75 of Ethiopia's external debt is controlled by the West. It's just that China's debt is more productive. All right. China doesn't tell you so much what to do. All right. But they look at what you need. The West and their debt, they don't look at what you need. As we're going to see when we are talking about the date, for example, which was given, of course, the international, the World Bank, the money which came in from World Bank, which is $1.5 billion. That money, a lot of people have, no one has been talking about it. Most of us have been concentrating on the International Monetary Fund, and we don't know where the World Bank's debt has slipped in to come in. But when you look at what they're going to use, the World Bank is dead. It is some ambiguous. It's normally wrapped, the debt from the World Bank especially is wrapped around some ambiguous terms. Okay, some ambiguous terms. And Mahlet, I think I've shared with you some of these terms which are normally used when it comes to the World Bank. All right. And some of these terms, they were actually in the past uh, rejected by people like, President Museveni. When it comes to Uganda, there's a document which passed around where the Ugandan president was rejecting the Ugandan president was rejecting these loans from the International Monetary Fund. Now, I'll share with you just briefly before I go to answer your question. Let me share with you this document so that you can have a look at it, where the Ugandan president was rejecting. He was rejecting, the loan from the World Bank. Why? Because it was not clear. And if you look at the loan which was given from the World Bank to Ethiopia, it is also almost in the similar line. And they make sure that you spend it on that particular aspect. So it is better to reject such loans in the onset when they are just coming, so that you don't accept, these particular loans. All right. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is a letter which was written by the Ugandan president to the public, to the public in 2023, as you are seeing, on the 9th of July, on the 9th of August in 2023. All right, as you are seeing. So he's saying that many of the loans and aid packages are either of no value to the country or are even anti-growth altogether. In the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries, for instance, we discovered that a total of 800 million US dollars had been borrowed over a period of 10 years. But that ministry did not have zonal diagnostic laboratories and research centers, did not have a repair, or did not even repair the mechanization centers, and did not buy the mechanization equipment like combined harvesters or even tractors, no irrigation equipment for farmers, no value addition equipment, etc. Much of that money was spent on seminars. Yet, those are the basic equipments of that ministry, if it is to assist in the struggle for socio-economic transformation. Therefore, most of the borrowing has been having no value addition to our transformation journey. Besides, in some cases, the aid policies are directly against growth. All right. So this was, of course, the Ugandan president. Now, there is areas where he mentioned that the Minister of Finance was asking him to sign on certain dates, okay, which were coming in from the World Bank. That's why I'm very skeptical about the $1.5 billion that is being slipped in under when the International Monetary Fund loan of $3.4 billion is coming in. Because what I'm seeing is that the $3.4 billion, which is being given by the IMF in Ethiopia, the government may have some level of control. But when it comes to the World Bank loans, it may not have a lot of control, because the World Bank loans are normally, shrouded in ambiguity. Those loans by the World Bank are normally shrouded in ambiguity. Now, one of the examples here is this. When you look at what the World Bank loan of 1.5 billion is going to do, they say is they are going to strengthen the financial sector. Now, you ask yourself, they are going to strengthen the financial sector. How are they going to strengthen the financial sector? It's like saying that the financial sector in Ethiopia is weak. And to what extent? There's no parameters. There's no extent to which this financial sector is going to be, strengthened. Now, they say that they are going to expand trade options, promoting exports and diversifying the economy. Is it the World Bank that does the diversifying of the economy? And can $1.5 billion really have an effect when it comes to diversifying an economy like Ethiopia's economy of more than $120 billion. Can 1.5 billion dollars, do that much that is going to strengthen the financial sector in Ethiopia? Because Ethiopia has already started carrying out the reforms in the financial sector by allowing in, external players to to come in. It had already started doing that. So this is what I'm saying, that their loans are normally, wrapped in ambiguity. But all this is because they are not coming to, accomplish much. Now, there's another thing which they said here, that is going to be used. The loan is going to be used to improve physical transparency. So, what is physical transparency? You see, so this is a problem, that they use these ambiguous terms sometimes to push loans which you don't need. So the loans is not necessarily that all the African countries really need them. Okay, and of course we have given you a background of the situation in Ethiopia. We know that Ethiopia needs, help when it comes to the rebuilding of the country, of course, rebuilding roads and other things. But $1.5 billion, I would like to hear the World Bank say we are going to build a solar panel manufacturing factory. All right. Instead of pushing these ambiguous terms, instead of, crafting documents which are filled with these ambiguous terms, like strengthening the financial sector, you see, expanding trade options. This is not really what the people need in the country. The people need factories and they need jobs. But you look at what they are saying, that they are going to improve physical transparency. To what extent are you going to improve physical transparency? You see, so this is where the problem is. And then they are going to protect the vulnerable households. So you can see that you cannot do all these things on $1.4 billion, for a population which is the second biggest on the African continent. So this is a problem. So that is where I'm coming in to say that it has to take, smart leadership. The leaders have to be really smart, extremely smart, that they can push back on these. And of course, we saw that with Ethiopia. That is the only way where we see that a country can be able to benefit from these loans. And of course, we have seen Rwanda also, to some extent, has been able to benefit from some of these loans which are given to it, is because of that pushing back, the leader standing up and saying that this is what we want for the country. And of course, finding you as a country, if they don't find you in a very vulnerable situation, whereby if you feel that if you don't, if you don't take these loans, your country will not be able to survive. And of course, the repaying of the loans also is another issue, that Ethiopia had defaulted on the $33 million loan, which is supposed to pay every year. So that one also becomes a problem, that it may require you to take the loan in order for you to repay a loan. And so that is what we are seeing even today in this kind of situation.
Thank you, Kwame, for that. Going through what these policies and demands of the IMF and World Bank from the Ethiopian government. Hopefully, the Ethiopian government will play it safe and smart. Will show the resistance that it has showed in the past couple of years, so that the interest of the people will not, or its nation will not be jeopardized by the demands of these institutions. Now, I don't think I have asked you before, but I don't think you did address it fully. So, like, really, to be honest, can we look into whether the loans given by these institutions can be beneficial, and are they going to be, beneficial, whether it's in Ethiopia or in other African countries, since the main aim of this platform is to bring an African narrative, or to give an African perspective. So that's not only Ethiopia, in the continent, and what are the consequences, the likely consequences of this kind of policies.
So let us look at for Ethiopia, of course, from the official document which the government gave out, and of course he said that it is a continuation for the for the reform that were started. All right, the reform agenda. But let us not forget that the IMF, of course, played a role in the crafting of these policies. Let us forget that that was the very reason why there was these negotiations with Ethiopia. And of course, the claim, of course, is that they are trying to help to increase the growth of the country, high growth, and have a stable economy, maintain the inflation. But on the onset, in the onset, even this very statement, the first statement, it looks like is the opposite of what is happening. Because remember that when your currency, is left free fall, is devalued, this is the genesis for inflation. This is the start of inflation, and goods are going to go up, and all this, and we have not seen anywhere where the International Monetary Fund has gone and there has not been inflation. Talk of Ghana, talk of Nigeria, talk of all these countries. Inflation is skyrocketing. They are not helping you to build really the industries or the infrastructure that is going to help you to serve the people, like power systems, major roads and railway systems. These are the major industries that you need. These are the major sectors that you need for the country to take off. Nigeria, for example, has around 4,000 4,000 megawatts of power installed capacity for a country of 200 million, more than 250 million, people, which is ridiculous, and very unfortunate. So you can see that in the onset, from the very first, some of the very first paragraphs that are given in the document itself, that they're talking about a stable economy and maintaining a single digit inflation. But right now, with the devaluation of the currency of the bill, the currency has already been devalued and inflation is gonna go, haywire. Why? Because the government has been told that it should not control the currency. It should leave it to float freely, which we are not seeing in China, which we are not seeing. All these conditions, mind you, are not given to already developed countries. These conditions are not given to the already developed countries. Now, whether the government will see that this thing is going out of control and they jump back in, to take control of the economy. So I think that is something that we need to watch as we go forward. But for now, that is what they are saying. So the document also said that over the past years, there has been significant development, cooperation and financing efforts and negotiations for the implementation of a homegrown economic reform program. These negotiations have been conducted with adequate knowledge and wisdom of the outcomes, that protect Ethiopia's national interests. So that's what they said. At least that's what the government is saying, and improve the lives of and livelihood of the citizens. As a result, it was possible to reach agreements aligned with the main macroeconomic objectives and order of policy reforms set by the government. So of course, this is the assurance from the government, but then, of course, we will learn as we go forward. This macroeconomic reform endeavor is within the framework of our homegrown economic reform program and mid-term investment and development plan, and is supported by an International Monetary Fund and World Bank and other critical development partners. Remember, we spoke about the fact that Ethiopia had already started its own reform, internal reform, since 2018, that the Prime Minister Abiy had already started reforming the economy, looking at the economy, industries here. I think, Mahlet, me and you were discussing about having industries, in the Oromo, in Oromia, and also these areas where there has been chaos. And we were saying that what is needed is really the Prime Minister to take there some industries, economic projects. And I think that this was really a good step. So the document is also saying that these programs will not be abandoned. Now, whether that is true or not true is for us to keep watching to see what will happen later. And of course, to understand how much the government conceded, in this process or in the process of negotiations, which of course the government will not come out and say today in the public, we just need to wait and see during the process as we go forward during the implementation. So they say that they are going to create a favorable balance to achieve national development needs through domestic capacity by solving debt vulnerability and increasing domestic income. So what this means for me is that uh, they are trying to say that you should not be indebted, all right? Don't be indebted. That is why they are saying that a favorable balance to achieve our national development needs through domestic capacity by solving debt vulnerability and increasing domestic income. Of course, some documents by the by the United Nations have come out to say that Ethiopia is one of the countries which have a very low, taxation to GDP, all right, ratio, that Ethiopia needs to increase the taxation. And so when you look at increasing domestic income, this is what it is driving at. This is what the International Monetary Fund is driving at. So I think that is one thing which people need to note out. That's why it is very important for our people not to jump up and celebrate, because I've seen a lot of Ethiopians celebrating that, oh, these reforms are going to bring this, these reforms are going to do that. But it's important to read the documents. It is important to read the documents yourself. But this is what it means here. Okay. Now, these IMF and World Bank, they are trying to control the Ethiopian economy. They are trying to tell you when to borrow and not to borrow. That is what they mean here, creating a favorable balance to achieve development needs through domestic capacity by solving debt vulnerability and increasing domestic income. All right, debt vulnerability, solve debt vulnerability, pay our debt. You're supposed to continue to pay our debt. Now they want to determine for you where you should borrow and where you should not borrow from. All right, so these are what these statements mean. Now there's another thing which I saw, that they spoke about strengthening the inclusiveness, competitiveness, and soundness of the financial sector. All right, strengthening the inclusiveness, competitiveness, and soundness of the financial sector. Now when you go back to one of the statements which I said that the World Bank's money is coming to do. Remember, they said that they want to increase the transparency of the financial sector. So they want to provide, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank wants to provide the consultancy services for the supervision of Ethiopia's financial sector, all right, and take a cut from the same money which they are giving you as, and you must pay this because you have signed on it and say that we are going to strengthen, the inclusiveness and competitiveness and soundness of the financial sector. That's why I told you that there is these ambiguous terms and ambiguous statements which normally come in these documents, and it's very important. That is why, again, you see that some of the heads of state, they reject them. They have been rejecting them. And people like Kwame Nkrumah, in those days in the 60s, this is someone who rejected some of the terms which we are given, some of the policies which we are given by the International Monetary Fund and the IMF, and completely say that we cannot implement that. That is ridiculous. We cannot implement it over here. So that is what you saw, that in April of this year, that Ethiopia rejected some of those terms and the IMF had to go back. You see? So now these are some of the things that are appearing in some of those documents, and it's very important for us to continue to watch. It is necessary, in addition, also necessary measures will be taken to protect vulnerable families and members of society from short-term negative impacts of the reform. Okay, so negative impacts of the reform. So they are telling you straight away that there's going to be negative impact to society. All right. In addition, necessary measures will be taken to protect the vulnerable members of society from short-term negative impacts of the reform. So they are announcing to you that there's going to be negative impacts for these reforms that the International Monetary Fund is bringing. So social safety net programs will be strengthened. In addition, low-income government employees will receive necessary wage subsidies. The government will also partially subsidize fuel price increments. All right. So they are saying there's going to be increment in the price, fuel price. All right. you listen carefully. The government is going to partially subsidize fuel price increments. So these are the words, these are the few words some of our people don't read when they go to these documents. Sometimes even full ministers, they don't read these documents. And that is where we have a problem with some of our African governments, that some people, they just go over there and sign. And these people have hidden inside words. Now they are saying that the government will also partially subsidize fuel price increments. So they are telling you that they are going to increase the fuel. Okay, they are going to force the government's hand to increase the fuel, but the government again must subsidize those fuel increments. All right, so I'm just showing you what is coming, when it comes to Ethiopia's program, the IMF program, which they have signed. Now, the removal of import restrictions that previously prohibited 38 product categories and the broader liberalization of the foreign exchange market for the import of goods and services, while capital account outflows remain restricted as before. All right. So while Ethiopia has retained control over capital when it comes to companies which are doing business within the country, they are saying that the goods which Ethiopia was restricting from importing into the country, about 38 products, it has to open the border. Now you ask yourself, why would the IMF allow this kind of activity to go on? Why would they require this kind of policy into the country, that you should allow products to import into your country? Because Ethiopia is not yet already a net exporter. All right, it's not a net exporter. So what products are they saying that you should allow within the country? And if you trace carefully these products, the so-called 38 products, it will surprise you that these 38 products will be coming from European countries or the United States. It will surprise you. So they are saying that you should remove import restrictions, remove it, and let your country import. Now, when you import, definitely you're gonna need foreign exchange, the so-called foreign exchange. You're gonna need the dollar to import those goods. So what they're encouraging, actually, they're encouraging more for Ethiopia to spend the foreign exchange, which it doesn't have. This is what they are encouraging. This is what the International Monetary Fund is encouraging. Let the imports come in, increase the imports, and pay the exchange, the foreign exchange which you have. So this is the International Monetary Fund. And they are saying that they need the broader liberalization of the foreign exchange. The broader liberalization, this is the word. The key word there is broader liberalization. Leave the foreign exchange to do whatever it wants in the country. Okay, let the dollars move in the country. And this is what, remember what I said in the statement which in one of the statements which I opened with, is that the United States wants to make sure that the dollar is everywhere. This benefits the United States because it prints more. It helps it to export the inflation to other countries. So this is what they are trying to achieve here. And of course, the United States exports its inflation with its European partners through the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. These are institutions. They export their inflation to our poor countries through the United States dollar using the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So that's what they are saying, that the broader liberalization of the foreign exchange market. When they're talking about the foreign exchange market, of course, they are just referring to the United States dollar. And they are saying that import. They're encouraging you to import. Import, go ahead and import. And let the dollars flow. And let the people who want to. So when they say liberalization, broader liberalization, they are just saying that don't control the dollar in the country. Let the people who want to import the goods. All right? You are restricting the movement of the dollar. You are restricting people who want to import goods from outside. Let them import. You see, so this is the International Monetary Fund for you. So the allowance of residents to open foreign currency accounts. Okay, so allow the residents in the country, the Ethiopians, to open dollar accounts in your country. So again, this is increased the circulation of the United States dollar within the Ethiopian economy. So they are taking, what they are doing is that they are taking
But Kwame, I would like to
Control of,
comment in that in a country where the black market is so high, or I would like to call it white market. I mean, anyway, this market out of the official exchange center, which is the bank. Uh, don't you think for foreigners to be allowed to keep their foreign currency, those who get their income through foreign currency, the allowance to keep that foreign currency will help, so that they don't go to these illegal markets. Yeah,
yes,
don't you
so
think
for
it
the
will play
foreigners,
any positive role towards that?
yes, for the foreigners, it is okay. But remember here, they are not
No,
saying
but even
foreigners.
for the locals, it could be a diaspora who live outside of the country, or they can send their remittance and open a dollar currency or whatever it is, and also those Ethiopians who get paid their salary in foreign currency.
Then there is no reason for us to have the bill, the local currency, as a tool for sovereignty. Okay, but the reason why we have the local currency as a tool for
But
sovereignty,
not everyone has. I mean, it's just maybe, I don't know, it could be less than 1%, or it could be 2% of the whole population.
of course, it is good to some extent. But what I'm saying is that when a foreign power or a foreign institution is encouraging this and saying that the government should not touch it, and without even knowing the economy or the country, without even having interest for the country at heart, then you need to question this. You definitely need to question this. So why would the International Monetary Fund want you to increase the presence of the dollar in your economy? You have to ask this question. Of course, you need the dollar itself as a country, but remember also, the dollar should not be earned through speculative activities. So it is almost like they are saying the central bank should speculate instead of the government working hard to increase the exports. Now look at the points where we are just look at the point where we are coming from. They are encouraging the increase of imports instead of increasing the exports so that you can earn more foreign exchange, from legitimate means. You see, these guys are encouraging you to import, and then they are encouraging those ones who want to have that dollar so that your economy should be taken over by the dollar. So this is almost losing sovereignty as a country, because we know that currency, your own currency is a tool for sovereignty. It's one of the tools for sovereignty. They can't go and give these policies to China. They can't. And China continues to control its economy. And these policies, these so-called policies like this, of the devaluation of the currency, like what we see, that the birr has been devalued by 30% on the first day, and then 15% on the next day. These devaluation are normally done at the willingness of the state itself for certain reasons. We have seen China devalue its currency on numerous reasons. Why? Because China is a net exporter. All right. So when it devalues its currency as China, it normally encourages people who are taking its goods, because it is exporting. They are cheaper. The goods are cheaper for them to buy in China when they devalue. So the Chinese currency is not expensive, too expensive when they come with their currency, their foreign currency, to buy the Chinese yuan, to use the Chinese yuan to buy the goods. You see, so this is the importance of devaluing. But if you are not a net exporter and you are an importer, it doesn't make sense for you to devalue your currency. And more so, someone is even encouraging you to import and encouraging other people, to have foreign accounts, to have accounts, dollar accounts in your country. So this is very, I think, very, very dangerous. Now, there is also the removal of interest rate ceilings that previously applied to private sector companies or banks when borrowing from abroad. You should remove interest rate ceilings that previously applied to the private sector companies and the banks when borrowing from abroad. And interest rates, of course, you can see that they are saying that your banks, when they are borrowing from abroad, you should not, restrict them from borrowing interest rate which is high. So if a company in your country wants to borrow at an interest rate of 60%, allow it. That is what they are saying. So this is the imported inflation that we are talking about. A few months ago, I think it was last month, the president of Dangote, a group of companies, which is Aliko Dangote, was talking about the interest rates in Africa. He said that the interest rates in Africa, they are unsustainable. One, because during the COVID period in 2020, we did not print currency as African continent. So why are you hiking the interest rates up to 30%? And which business can you run in your country at all those interest, those huge interest rates? So this also is, when you look at this point 10, is encouraging people to import inflation into the country. And they are saying that remove the interest rate ceilings that previously applied to private sector companies or banks when borrowing from abroad. So this, for me, I look at it as a very dangerous sign. Now, the opening of Ethiopia's securities market to foreign investors, with the terms and conditions to be specified further, in the near future, I think that one could be good because it helps new money to come into the country. Yeah. So these are some of the things I think. I'm not gonna say this is what it is, but I leave it to the viewer for them to decide what they see in these documents and what these documents really they mean, in your own language and your own understanding. But when you look at it, that is the analysis that we have brought you when it comes to these documents and what is likely to happen. Okay, from our own analysis, that is what is likely to happen. So the government, in our understanding, in one way or the other, may need to step in, and put things in order, or even run the economy better, so that they can do away with all, IMF and World Bank policies in the future.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. Yeah, we have exceeded our time, but I cannot let you go or end this session without asking, what if a country finds itself in a very tight situation or a deadlock situation, maybe like Ethiopia, who just came out of war and different internal conflicts and denial of funds, this and that, and when there's no alternative, uh, what should a country do? And speaking of alternative, do you think, because one of the audiences or a couple of audiences here have also raised it in the chat section, this money that now Ethiopia is borrowing, or even other African countries, cannot be done if you are a member of BRICS to get it from BRICS, or it's not
Yeah,
yet
I
possible?
think BRICS Bank. Yeah, so that is the threat
Or
which
China, for
the
that
West.
matter.
Yes, of course, China has been borrowing these countries' money. That's why we say that about 25 to 30% of Ethiopia's external debt is owed to China, and then the rest of the 70 to 75% is owed to the West and its institutions. So it is possible to borrow even from the BRICS banks, but the question is, I don't know whether the BRICS banks they have that kind of
Yeah,
money.
whether it's yet operational, and for different
Yeah,
reasons, China might
yeah,
not have been, it might not have been accessible,
really.
the funds
Yeah.
from China. So what can a country do? I mean, its nation is at stake, or the economy. What do you say
Yeah,
on that? It's in a deadlock.
so if you don't have, there's dynamics here now when it comes to the borrowing of money. You look at the United States and European countries; all of them are indebted, including these ones. The Paris Club, who are saying that they put money in the International Monetary Fund. They are highly indebted countries, but the distinction they have over us is because for them they are superpower countries and they are developed countries. And you look at the United States, can simply go and print money. All right, it can print money. Even for us, in the laws, and the fact that the United States, its currency is a reserve currency, so that gives this an edge. And of course, the other European countries, all of them are attached to the United States. So that is a problem. Now, for us as poor countries, that leaves us with no option. Okay, in most cases, like you mentioned, when it comes to countries which are really in huge problems, you are coming from war, it is similar to what happened to us when we were coming from colonialism, because when they created these institutions after the period of colonialism in 1945, 1940, 1944, 1945, we were emerging from colonialism, all right? And we needed money to rebuild. And countries who had the money, it was the United States majorly who had the money. And it was the one who was putting that money in the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. So there was nowhere for us to go. All right. So there was nowhere for us to go. Even during this period, actually, right now, it is much better that you have the options. You have the options of China, you have the options of BRICS. Maybe once in a while, even India can give you a loan here and there. All right. But in the past, it was almost the United States alone, and of course, the Soviet Union, which used to give. When you read in Nkrumah's book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, it was the Soviet Union and China, even though China was not very rich during that period, which were giving, favorable loans to our countries. All right. So in many cases, you see that there is no option, there's nowhere to go but to take the
Yeah.
conditions which are available during that period. Yeah. So that is why you see that sometimes we look like we are in a cycle, of going into debt and borrowing to pay a debt. And so that is what you are seeing right now, that Ethiopia is in, that it has to borrow to pay a debt. All right. It has to borrow to pay a debt which it had failed to pay, in 2023 and then
Yeah.
2024 and all that. So that's what, for them, of course, they call debt restructuring, just to borrow you more money so that you can pay the previous debt.
Yeah, it's sad how they put you in that vicious circle. Now, I will reflect, I'll have my own reflection, but let me just go to some of the notes written here in the chat section. The last emperor, he or she said, I think it would be worth doing a presentation on the basics of finance. So the implication of some of these points would make sense to the layman's. Okay, that's a note for you. The BRICS point, I think it has been addressed. I don't think it's operational yet. So Ethiopia, as a member of BRICS, if there was an option for Ethiopia to take a loan from BRICS, I really don't think there's any reason for Ethiopia to go to this financial institution that sucks literally your blood. But another one, yeah, there was a question whether these terms and conditions can change if the government change. I don't think so.
Now, once
Yeah.
you sign on onto the terms, you can't change them. That is why they supervise them. The reason, and I mentioned this, is that the reason they give you this money in chunks, in portions, in partitions, they partition it, is because they want to supervise, to make sure that you are implementing what they are saying. All right. And we said that Ethiopia refused that first, refused some of the terms, and this is where the contest was. That is why the IMF went back. I think we showed that we showed some article which was like that. Uh, you know, they were pushing it, so they push it for a certain reason. Okay, they tell you to
I
devalue
mean, we
for a
all have
certain
to
reason.
pay attention. Ethiopia really has fought not to give. I mean, I don't
Yes,
know if it's a giving in or whatever, but
yes.
it
So it is
really
not
has,
free.
the country has fought this.
So it is not free, and they are trying to impose. So let me repeat this. They are trying to impose the Western system on you so that you don't have an independent economy, which is outside of their control. That is the point. All right. That is the point. They are trying to, uh, you know, uh, capture you, right? I think capturing is the right word. They are trying to totally capture you so that you don't have independent action. You don't have a room for independent action. So that is the purpose. So even for an economy which had room for independent action, they can come and take over. Their financial institutions can come and take over, like the hedge funds, BlackRock, and all these. Okay, so when they're talking about let the international investors, there was a statement like that. Let the international investors come into the Ethiopian stock market and invest in the stock market. So now they are looking at, for example, Western institutions like BlackRock. They will come and say, they can push you to sell off the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. All right. And BlackRock will take control over that dam. Okay. Now, when BlackRock takes control over that dam, it is all the money, all the benefits. They didn't build this dam, but they want to take the benefits. Now, it is happening in places like Uganda right now. Total Energies has just signed, I read an article yesterday. Total Energies has just signed a contract whereby it is going to take over one of the dams in Uganda. Okay. So, and that dam has now been, in the past, has been controlled by a consortium of hedge funds from Norway and Britain. Now, Total Energy is the one taking over. So even in Ethiopia, it can happen like that. So the door, now they are trying to open the door in that kind of manner, that companies like BlackRock, which are very much interested in controlling global infrastructures, all the infrastructure in the world, they can come in and say this is a very huge and lucrative infrastructure. They will go in the back door room, and they do analysis on the dam, and they see how much it's going to benefit. But ironically, yet the United States, working with Egypt, was against the dam, the building of the dam. But if they see that in the next 20 years it's going to generate a lot of money, they will find a way the BlackRock will find a way of working with the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, because you are indebted. You are highly indebted to them. Now they will say, we want the dam. You either pay us the money, or we want the dam. We have to take the dam. And, when we finish collecting the money, then we can give it back to you. So for the next 20 years, you can see that the money that will be generated from the dam, or they will say that maybe, BlackRock wants to buy shares in Ethiopia'S. Data just came out that Ethiopia'S, the revenue which it generated, last year, huge revenue. So they can say that they want to take shares in that. So this is how they work. So, but this could be just a means of opening the gate for them to get in. But of course, people who are not reading, who are not reading it internally, they may celebrate in the interim, may celebrate, oh, Ethiopia has got the money, oh, we celebrate, we jump up and down. But what is coming later on, is much more dangerous. So when you are talking about this topic, we called it, we called it somewhere a civilizational state, or consequences to a civilizational state. For a civilizational state, people are proud of what they have achieved in the past for thousands and thousands of years. All right. And that is why you see China was built the way it was built. They have rebuilt. They don't build by following, dictates or advice from other people, what they are saying. They look at the situation and they analyze, they make their own mistakes, and then they correct them. That is how China was built. That is how China was built. So China, when China was ready to engage the world, it engaged the world actually on its own terms. You never had the International Monetary Fund. You never had China, taking the advice of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. Nowhere where China took the advice of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. So that's why we say that, what are the consequences? What could be the consequences? Because Ethiopia is considered one of those civilizational states that the people in that particular state are proud of what they have achieved in the past, and now they want to try out a new path in this modern, era that we are living in. So this is where it is, tricky, and is very difficult to reconcile, of course, for the ordinary person, the current state that we are dealing with, the current situation that we are dealing with, which is financial, and reconciling that with building a state. You see, so these two things need to be reconciled and say, are we building an independent state, or are we building a satellite state that is to be controlled by the European countries and the United States and the West? So I think that is a question that we can answer, another day.
Thank you, Kwame. It's a good place to end it, as we all can reminisce on that one, and perhaps okay, bring from the other side also, what it meant to be this loan for Ethiopia, if there is a different view. But I would just say this briefly. I think for any African, whose government is going through such pressures, immense pressures by IMF and World Bank, we may have been, as even an ordinary citizen, an accomplice of this because of our internal conflicts that we turn against the government, this and that, and we don't see the bigger picture of a state, forgetting that governments change, and the countries, the people will states. At the end of the day, it's the people that make a states. And if, because I remember when Prime Minister Abiy came to power, he introduced this policy for the Ethiopian diaspora, not policy, but he suggested, and it was really owned and embraced, welcomed by many Ethiopian diasporas, from all the macchiato or coffee that you are buying from this, what is this, the most uh, known coffee buying place? I forgot. It slipped out of my tongue. Anyway, if you can donate, €4 or €5 or $5, you buy macchiato, your macchiato. If you can just dedicate €1 or $1 for your country for every coffee that you are buying, then he put it in perspective and in figures with relative to the number of diasporas that are outside of the country, whether it is being the East, Middle East, West, it doesn't matter. So it was really a brilliant idea, and he said even that will be the account will be controlled by the committee that is established by those diaspora independently from the government. But of course,
Yeah,
the government.
so you can see that
So we may have been an accomplice. It was welcomed, and many Ethiopians were motivated to do that and have been doing that. But whenever there's a conflict arise, whether it is north, west, south in the country, then you turn and say you run to these illegal markets that are so-called black markets, and then you stop to to put those deposits. But, at the end of the day, if that was really governed by independent committees, it may have resulted a positive impact and somehow reduced this amount of pressure that the country had by this financial institution. So at the end of the day, I mean, it may sound like a cliche, but as an African, we always take part in our own demise. So we just have to really examine, the actions that we are taking. We have to see beyond, beyond leaders. That we have to see the bigger pictures. Whatever things that we are holding against the ruling party.
Yeah, so it's definitely very good to have foreign exchange, and during that period, I think one of the things which was mentioned is that before the Tigray War broke out, Ethiopia was having a lot of foreign exchange from even from its diaspora. But when the Tigray War broke out, the remittances from foreign exchange from remittances, of course, reduced, and this became a problem actually for the country itself. So what we are saying here is that because to some extent it may sound even contradictory that on one side we are saying that the IMF should not allow in too much foreign exchange, and then on the other side we are saying that the diaspora should bring in foreign exchange. So the thing is that you need to keep a balance for a country which is growing, a country which is just growing. You need this foreign exchange to to do what, to import. All right, to import, for example, you can use it as capital, because remember, there's goods which you don't have in your country. Okay, now those goods, you use the foreign exchange to import them, like machinery. Now if you want machinery for production, you want to use it for production so that you can do import substitution. All right, then you need the foreign exchange. But that foreign exchange, now you should not be enslaved to that foreign exchange and bring in foreign exchange with the policies which are instead encouraging you to import consumption, goods for consumption, and which are not goods for production. So that's the difference between what we are saying, between the foreign exchange which is good and the foreign exchange which is dangerous for the country. Okay, now the IMF and International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, what they come with, foreign exchange for importation and opening gates. As we have seen, they are saying that you should open gates for importing. You see, so they are not saying that you should, goods, you should not open, to increase production and maybe build a railway, like what we have seen that China helped, Ethiopia and Djibouti to build a railway platform. The World Bank and the IMF, they will not do that to help you to build maybe a dam. You see, so this is the difference. This is the difference that we are talking about. Foreign exchange is only needed to the extent whereby it acts as capital for you to buy certain goods which are going to help you to do production in your own country, and even to the extent that you will not need that foreign exchange somehow, somewhere. Because like if you negotiate with China and say most of the goods, because Ethiopia gets most of its goods from China, if you're going to get most of your goods from China, why not negotiate with China and say, China, let us pay in renminbi? Of course, that is also will be foreign exchange on your part, but it also helps you to reduce the pressure that you have only to deal with dollar. So that is the point that we are talking about here. But the IMF is trying to say you have to deal with the dollar only, and those are the policies that they are trying to implement in Ethiopia. If you look at all the documents that have been signed.
Yeah, but in any case, if we have continued, depositing that foreign currency, whether it's euro, dollar, or anything, whether it's to import machinery so that the country can embark on manufacturing industry, somewhere it is needed. I mean, we still are dependent on this foreign currency, so it could have been used for that. But yeah, it is what it is. Thank you very much, Kwame, for your time, for your analysis. Hopefully this will provoke another thoughts, and so that for a continued discussions, if there's a different view or whatever, it's all welcome. Yeah, so we had another streaming with Kwame here at Connect Africa with regards to Dangote and media, how this mainstream media,
The Western media.
the Western media is attacking. So it was scheduled. Actually, we are late by 18 minutes, 1-8. I see that. Just give us 10 minutes more just to transition ourselves and tune in again for another interesting, really, really interesting session, so that it can give you a picture how this Western media attack, together with the governments in a very synchronized way. It will make us understand for many things, happening in Africa. Yeah, so we will see you again in a bit. But Mohamed Musa, De Juma Boutique, Patricia, Sandra, Yoruba Land, Salem Arts was not happy he or she left. Anyway, Osie, okay, thank you, Osie, for all your continued, inputs and the things that you're sending us. via email, and all of you child of God, who did I miss? Yeah, all of you, thank you, and see you in a bit again. Thanks again. Don't forget to share the video, to subscribe, to give it a like, and all, even as you all are subscribed, I assume. So please share the next videos that we are going to stream to others so that they can tune in with us. If you want to support us, go ahead to the description section. You can donate to our PayPal account. But those of you who have been donating consistently and supporting us, thank you very much. So bye bye. Ciao, come. Thank you.